Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
You are listening to the Brilliance Business Show, conversations with leading experts in business. I am your host, Mark Stephen Pooler, and today I have an incredible guest, AKA Grant. AKA is a growth strategist, and our topic today is developing Boss Uncaged brand allows business owners to free themselves. Welcome to Brilliance Business, AKA.
Definitely. Thank you for having me, Mark. It's a pleasure being here.
I'm really looking forward to a conversation with you today. Before I get started, I just need to make a legal disclaimer that AKA is not offering legal advice or legal assistance. So let's get started with the show. AKA, I'm really, really impressed with the brand that you have built. It's so beautiful to look at online, and you really are serving your community with your podcasting, with all the systems that you're putting in place for your clients, with your speaking, your books, and how you help your clients to systemize it all together, which many business owners do struggle to fit all the pieces together. Can you just share for our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah. So my original origins started off kind of playing around with art. And it's funny that, in art, you always try to figure out how do you make money. So my parents decided to throw me in art school. By default, by trade, originally I became a graphic designer. And in that journey, I realized that I was both analytical and creative, 50% on both sides. So then after that, I decided to get into web development and web design. And then I kept on this journey and I was still hungry for more information. So I got my Series 6, I got into life insurance, and I went to all these different facets of business just because I was hungry for more information. And through this journey, I then kind of said, okay, how do I put all these things together? And then who am I going to target? And that was kind of like the dawn of the Boss Uncaged brand. So right now, what I would say I do is I find my most joy in coaching authors, podcasters, entrepreneurs, educators, and publishers with their growth strategies.
And it's great what you're doing, and we're very, very similar. Can you just share a little bit of more of your journey? Just go into a little bit more detail of how you serve your clients.
Yeah, so originally it was just more so clients would call me because they knew I had graphic design background, and obviously in my Boss Uncaged brand, you can kind of see some of these design elements through and through.
Yes.
So that was like the original lead magnets. It was they would come in for graphic design, and then I had my multimedia background, so it was kind of an easy upsell to say, okay, you needed a logo, but you also needed a website. As the years continued, I realized like that was more so the low-hanging services, but there was more problems with clients behind the scenes. And I became more of a strategist, kind of diving deeper, asking more questions like you just asked me, to dive a little bit deeper into what I actually do for a client. So when a client sits down with me, there's an intake form that I ask them about, okay, what's your value proposition? Who's your client sectors? Like what is that niche? What are you going to sell them? And what do your conversions look like? So we really get into that conversation before we design anything, before we develop anything. And as that conversation evolves, then they give me an opportunity to give them a clear outline to say, okay, I think you would be good as an author. Create this book. This book will become your lead funnel. That lead funnel will then feed into this. You would have a landing page that captures those leads. And in addition to that, maybe you should have a podcast. That way you can kind of grow your target audience and talk to them on a regular basis.
These systems are really, really clever, and it took me a long time to get them all in place, and I'm still got lots of work to do on that essay. And you mentioned your graphic design. It really does show. I really like the way you have laid out all of your graphics. They just look really impressive. And I'm just really intrigued of when a client comes to you, what are the biggest problems that they're facing?
Well, I guess with anybody that's reaching out to anybody for help, the first and foremost thing is always like revenue, right? They always want to talk about how can they get more sales or more leads. And behind that, there's also another issue that they're not realizing is that, okay, you want more leads, but are your systems in place to support those leads? Like currently you have a client that came in, that cold market client became warm and then they converted into a hot client. But what are you doing to upsell them later on? Like, how are you still servicing that client because they're the low hanging fruit versus going on and getting new? What are you doing to keep the old?
Got you. And this can really, really help people to grow. And it's much easier to look after existing customers than to keep on finding new customers as well. Now, we did touch on your podcast at the beginning, Boss Uncaged. Tell us all about this. It's an incredible show to serve your audience and to serve your clients as well. Tell us all about it.
I think it's a beautiful thing because, again, I'm half creative, half analytical. So on one side of the coin, it allows me to reach out to entrepreneurs, authors, podcasters, educators, and publishers and have them on the show to talk about their businesses, talk about their services, but more so their journeys. Like, how did you get there? Because if somebody listening in, they may be wanting to step out of corporate America today, but they don't know how. And hopefully as they listen to the episode, they may have gotten one other piece of the puzzle to allow them to jump over and cross over into becoming an entrepreneur. That's on one side. On the other side, it's, I had a stroke about 2 years ago. And, once you survive something like that, you wake up and you realize that, okay, what's my legacy? What am I going to leave behind? So I was like, okay, I need to create a platform that allows me to talk to my kids and my grandkids and family members and friends for decades and centuries to come and have the two bridge together. So I have one hand where I'm talking to people and helping them. And the other hand, I'm leaving behind a legacy with my voice to guide my family and friends down the road.
I like that. And I have to add as well, you're such a great host. I was lucky enough to be interviewed by SA just yesterday on the Boss Uncaged show. And he is a really, really good host, a really good interviewer. I'm definitely going to be bringing some of my clients to you so that you can interview them, SA, because you're just so good at what you do. My next question is, what really motivates you to jump out of bed every single morning?
I mean, it just kind of comes down to like the podcast. I mean, money is great and making money and having wealth is definitely something that anybody should strive for. But for me, I wake up every single morning with the ingenuity to realize that I'm creating something, and whatever I'm going to create, once I'm dead and gone, it's going to live on past me. So it's about supporting these systems and creating this ecosystem of Boss Uncaged. So that way this brand and this entire unit could then continue to grow. So every morning I wake up and I have a checklist. Okay, what am I going to do today? Like, for example, today I'm working on the app for Boss Uncaged. And every day I'm waking up and I'm working and I'm like, okay, once this app is done, what's next on my list? Well, it's creating a book to support Boss Uncaged, kind of like going back to my season 1 and taking the tidbits of the interviews and creating like a catalog of information to support the podcast. So again, every single day I wake up with the ingenuity of I want to complete something that's going to be part of the bigger brand.
We are very, very similar, SA. I plan out my list the night before I go to bed, and then I wake up to my fresh list and get through it, tick those boxes, really planning and serve others as well. We're very, very alike. Do you recall a specific aha moment that led to the launch of your business?
Oh, man. So my original business was Cerebral 360, which, I still own 100% of that. And that's kind of like my graphic design and website, right? But Boss Uncaged didn't really come to me until post-stroke when I woke up and I was like, I have to create something. And I was like, I was working too hard to create an agency. And I was like, there's got to be an easier way and a more beneficial way of doing this. And that's when I dove into podcasting. And I was realizing that, okay, not only podcasting is going to help me grow my business, but it's going to give me an opportunity to talk to people like you and help me continue and grow my network. It's kind of like continuing education times networking every single time I get on a podcast.
Collaboration Definitely, the world is all about collaboration. May I ask you, what do you mean when you say post-stroke?
So back in 2018, I had a stroke. I have a stent in my head. I had to go under the knife, and pretty much it was one of those things that just kind of genetically I was inclined to have it. So it kind of just snuck up on me, like literally before I turned 40. It happened. I made a full recovery. So after that recovery, that period of 90 days where you kind of go through the depression, you kind of trying to figure things out, and you're not the same person as you was. Like my speech patterns slowed down. I had to, kind of recover my speech to where I'm speaking now as a native New Yorker more fluently. But if you go back to 2018, at the time, I had more of a southern draw. So kind of overcoming that became the opportunity for me to slim down and systematize what I was doing.
Thank you for going into more detail with that. And yes, they are difficult things to get through, and obstacles definitely make us stronger. And you do motivational speaking as well, SA. Do you share this story? Because that is so inspiring.
It's funny that you brought that up, because I'm so big into like the results. But to your point, obviously that's going to be part of my story just moving forward. I just recently started expressing that, because for the longest, for me, it was just something that I overcame, and I would just focus on the results. But that's part of who I am. That's part of why I have the results that I have right now. So to your point, it's definitely going to be something that I'm going to deliver moving forward in my story and in my speeches.
I definitely want to hear more. I really like that part of your story, SA. It's so valuable, and people will really connect with it, and it will really help and inspire others. So I'm glad that you went into more detail about that today. Now, I want to know, why is your service especially important in today's modern world?
Because I'm an abstract thinker, man. I'm really about thinking outside the box, and that doesn't mean I'm inventing something new. What I'm really doing is looking at what's out there and figuring out the connections between them, and then delivering that. Because a lot of times, prime example, I have clients that one may be a doctor, and his education is more so in the medical side, but he wants to understand marketing. So guiding him in that direction and giving him the pieces of the puzzle that I've been able to execute successfully kind of motivates him to understand a whole new spectrum and space that he never would have even thought existed beforehand.
I hear you. And could you just share a few more details of the kind of service and products that you offer?
So literally, I would say, like, as an author, last year alone, I had opportunity to publish 5 books. And for my clients, we published 2 best-selling books for them as well. So that's a service that we have as far as like a publishing. I always say we're like with the middle. We're not a full-blown publisher, but we understand the systems. We understand the algorithm. We know how to make you a top seller. We know how to kind of get the content written in a short period of time. So we can help someone go from an idea of a book to actually have a fully created best-selling book on Amazon. Second to that would be podcast. I've been doing podcasts for a period of time now, so I have a lot of systems in place. I have a lot of creative things behind the scenes that I utilize to get my podcast to look and sound the way it does, so then I can help them if they want to create a podcast. After that, then we also have our Cerebral brand, which goes back to my original brand of creating visual content, creating websites. And that's the brand that would help them, if they want to design out their marketing materials for their podcast, they want to design their book cover, that's the brand that I own that will be able to help them do that. And then going into the education side, like course development, and kind of getting the courses created and understanding the philosophy behind the content that they're going to deliver, we can also help them with that as well.
This is great, SA, and what I'm getting from what you're doing, you're like a store for entrepreneurs, and no matter where you are in your journey, whether you're at the beginning or whether you're higher up and want to get to the next level, you make it all come together and you can make that journey really smoothly. I had to do a lot of guesswork when I started in my journey and fit the pieces of the puzzle together myself, guessing, and doing it slowly, making lots of mistakes. And what I'm getting from you, you can get them the book, you can get them the media, you can get them the speaking experience. You just fit it all together and combine it so that they can do it a lot smoother. Do you agree with me there?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I mean, essentially, it's AKA Grant as a brand, Uncaged as a brand, and Cerebral 360 as a brand. Together, when they combine, it's essentially coaching someone from start to completion. To your point, it's someone that's brand new becoming an entrepreneur and someone that's more seasoned that want to add on a little bit more monetization to particular things that they have access to.
Got you. Now, I know you've got lots of success stories. I want you to just pick one that really stands out to you, SA.
I would say that the one that I like to use is Dr. B of C Baby. And it just kind of like when we first started working with C Baby was essentially about 10 years ago. And we were kind of like their webmaster. We just helped them with their web platform. That's how we got in the door with that particular client. And over the years, we've helped him create and develop a course. We've helped him create and develop a podcast. He's one of the books that we published last year that was a bestseller. Right now, he's working on Clubhouse and trying to figure out things of how he can kind of speak to a larger audience. So he's a constant reminder that what we're doing is being useful, and he is utilizing every aspect of what we have to offer in multiple aspects of his business.
I like that. And that's just a true example of how to really move forwards, make progress, and a great testimony to the work that you do. Now, how do clients typically hear about you? And are there certain life moments that usually lead to them seeking you out?
It's kind of funny that you asked that question. I think because Cerebral 360 has been around since 2000, a lot of times, because it's funny, because now that I have the podcast and people see me on the podcast and they hear me on the podcast, I'll get the question of, do you still do graphic design? Do you still do multimedia? And I'm like, yeah, that company is live and well. And essentially it's like the bloodline that kind of brings in, because our database is so huge in that spectrum. And then we can kind of shift them into the coaching. We can shift them into the authoring. And so it's more of an upsell for what we're doing now versus what we've done before.
Nice. And I would like to ask you to share a word of wisdom. There's lots of entrepreneurs out there, lots of businesses that have gone out of business and closed down due to the last year of the pandemic. There may be a lot of new entrepreneurs coming into the space who are struggling with their systems, not knowing where to start. What word of wisdom can you give them to help them to make the process a little bit easier so they can move forward and make progress?
So I would look at it as, like, I always say failure is essentially like being in a cage. Hence why I've named the podcast Boss Uncaged, right?
Yes.
So you're temporarily in this cage. You can't live in this cage forever. It's a temporary situation. So always think about, once you get out the cage and on the journey of getting out the cage is the point A to point B. So visualize where you're going to be once you're out the cage, and that's going to be your goal. That's going to be your focus. It has nothing to do with your current failure. Your current failure is just a setback. It's just a hurdle, and you're going to overcome that. You're going to break out of that cage, but you have to want to break out of the cage by having the desire to achieve your goals.
I like that. That's a great, great word of wisdom. Now, you help and support all your community of great, great clients. You give them all the tools, the systems that they need, and really help them to grow their brands. My question is, you do all of this for your clients. You obviously work on these things for yourself. So you must have all these great systems that you teach others, but you have got access to those because you're the man that does it. So my question for you is, what is next for SA? What is your next level that you want to get to, and the next systems you're going to be working on?
So, I mean, that's like a macro versus micro question. So on the micro side of things, right, my next hurdle that I'm going to overcome and achieve is all these different tentacles me to have a home, right? I have sagrant.com, I have cerebral60.com, I have bossuncaged.com, but I need an environment so I can kind of send everyone to. So right now, currently, we're working on an application, and this app essentially is going to take the Boss Uncaged podcast and all its tentacles and have a button on this app to allow the users to have full access to it. In addition to that, we have a book club. This app is going to have the book club in there. SA Grant as a consultancy is going to have that in there. And then our course development side of things that we're working on behind the scenes is going to have a Boss Uncaged Pro or Boss Uncaged Academy button on this app. So that's my next goal, is to finish creating this
brilliant
app to have everything in one place.
You couldn't have answered that better, SA. I'm actually new to fitness, and I've hired a celebrity personal trainer, and I'm getting coached and transforming my body over a 12-week period. I have joined this community on Facebook and being coached, but I'm part of this app, and it's absolutely amazing what apps can do these days. So I think it's just made me realise the power of an app and how it can really support others with their businesses to grow, and also help you to grow as well. So I just think that's a really great thing that you're working on. Congratulations. I think that's a really, really wise move. SA, I have really enjoyed having a conversation with you today. Is there anything we did not cover that you would like to share? Any final words?
Final words, I would just say, wherever you are currently on your journey and whatever hurdles and obstacles that you're going to be faced with, just always remember that that is not the end result. And the end result is always going to be ahead of you. And you always need to keep crawling and clawing and biting and chewing and pulling at whatever that goal is. And once you achieve that goal, then you have to understand, is this it? Or is there going to be more things that you can do to help other people now that you've made it to the Plymouth Rock?
Great. I've really enjoyed these words of wisdom. And as we know as entrepreneurs, SA, there's always another level. No matter how high up you are, there's always more. There's always another level. There's always more growth, always more things to implement into your business to get to that next level. SA, I have really enjoyed having you on the Brilliance Business Show. Could you just share with our listeners, how can our audience connect with you? How can they get in touch if they'd like to see what you're about or get involved in the podcast?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for the podcast, it's very simple. It's podcast.bossuncaged.com. And to contact me, just in generally, I would just go to sagrant.com. And that's kind of like my consultant website. And it has not necessarily services on there, but you can get more insight about who I am and what services I have.
SA, thank you so much for being on the Brilliance Business Show.
Definitely. I appreciate it, Mark. And I look forward to us working together in the future. And to your point, having an opportunity to interview your guests on my show would be definitely a wonderful thing.
That will definitely be happening, SA. Thank you once again. You have been listening to the Brilliance Business Show, conversations with leading experts in business.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.